Hello, everyone. Yay. So I've been watching the chat pod, and it kind of feels like we're at the United Nations. There is basically a representative from every country, it feels like. And that is awesome. So I said this at the beginning, but just to repeat, please keep that chat pod busy and going. If you've got ideas throughout the session, please be sure to share them with the group. That's a great deal of the value of this session. It's added by the people who are actually attending. So keep that going. We actually had a great webinar a couple weeks ago where I was planning on sharing 15 ideas about training marketing, and we ended up with probably 10 times that just because of the chat pod. So please keep those coming. All right, so as Mel said, here is our agenda for today. We've got three main topics. So we're going to be going into social learning, LMS gamification, and also using learning technology to drive engagement using badges, leaderboards, and rewards. So we'll be talking about the ideas of how to build these into your existing curriculum. We'll also actually show some examples of how this could look within a learning technology platform. So this is going to be a fun session, and I hope you get a lot out of it. All right, so to just start with social learning, this is something that I think is important to define because there are a lot of different definitions floating around the internet, and some people feel like social learning is a more specific concept. Some people feel like social learning is a more broad concept, and I'm actually kind of more on the broad side. So if you want to share your thoughts on how you would define social learning, go ahead and start doing that in the chat box. So for me, social learning is basically anything that encourages communication and collaboration amongst the learners. It's basically the opposite of that concept where the instructor's at the front of the room and they're talking and everybody's listening quietly and holding their questions till the end. So this can come in a variety of different delivery formats. This is something that can be built into a classroom training or a virtual training or anything that you want. And the idea is that every single person that attends a class is an expert in something. Every learner is a teacher. They've got something to provide. And as you're saying in the chat, it's all about collaboration. It's about having a collective community learning session. So when we talk about social learning, we think about the things that will enable us to provide that to the learner. I think the greatest thing about social learning actually isn't the learning necessarily. It's actually the ability for us as learning professionals to build our community within our organization. And if we're really doing our job to the fullest extent that we possibly can, I think that's what we do. We take everyone, we give them new skills, but we also build a group that complements itself and works together well. So some other thoughts in the chat. Let's look here. Yeah, Madison is saying enable all to have a voice to teach, not just share an opinion on a topic, and that's beautifully said. Dave, social learning is the oldest way to learn. As you spend more time with others who have the same passion, you gain skills and knowledge. So definitely social learning builds on the knowledge of the entire group because trainers are very knowledgeable, obviously. We want to think of ourselves that way, but we don't have all of the answers. The group does between everyone collectively. And Lindsay, what about the idea that every teacher is a learner? Absolutely. Both ways. Great, great thoughts. All right, so now that we've defined social learning, let's talk a little bit about how it can manifest. If we're using learning technology to promote social learning, to enhance our ability to provide that, here are a few traits, here are a few features that we might be using for social learning. So looking at the chat box and Dave is being funny. Okay. Learning technology. What are some other forms of learning technology that you can think of that promote social learning? I've got a few that are listed here on the slide. The first one being discussion boards. And as you can imagine, discussion boards are just one other way, if everyone is virtual, to make sure that everyone can contact other people and share their thoughts. And discussion boards can be used in a very basic way. They can be used to just give feedback about a course and let others know what you think, basically comment on content. That's something that you commonly see in LMSs. You can also use discussion boards in a more complicated sense. So, for example, for me, the first time I really saw discussion boards used effectively, I was in a college course that was being delivered online, and we were providing everything in terms of our assignments via discussion boards. So other people could see those assignments, give feedback, constructive criticism, and that way we're learning from everybody's opinions and getting a more rounded sense of whether our work really satisfies the requirements of the assignment. So as Elaine is saying, peer teaching, absolutely, that's an opportunity for peer teaching. Review of work from Kelly, yes, absolutely. Madison, a discussion board can share audio recordings as well, not just text. That's true. It depends on the discussion board. That's absolutely true, though. And in a lot of cases, you can Dropbox assignments using a discussion board, depending on the discussion board. The next point I've got on here, learners' ability to rate, comment on, and share content with others. So this can take a lot of different forms. I'm sure you've seen, if you've ever looked at a variety of learning management systems, you are going to see a lot of different forms of rating systems. So you might have the 1 to 5 star system that you see here on the slide. You could also have a system where once the learner has completed the content, they can click a smiley face or a frowny face. And the whole point of it is when somebody else is looking for courses in the course catalog, they can kind of see those ratings and see what their colleagues thought and maybe also see their comments. And it's also very common to be able to share content with other people, either in the more basic format of being able to send them a link to a course, or actually being able to click a button within the interface and send that off to somebody you know would be interested in it. And just looking at the chat here, social learning could be discussion, chat, blogs, wikis, shared whiteboards, shared visual workspace from Brian. Absolutely, very good. Great examples. Jessica, maybe video conference, office hours, or group hours. Absolutely, and that's an amazing idea. I actually saw this when a learning management system was being rolled out to a large organization of about 90,000 people. And, obviously you have a huge number of administrators around the globe working with us, and they used to have office hours. The administrators would come in and figure things out together. That's a great solution. Marcus, group projects, absolutely. All right, so gamification is actually on here, and for me, I think of gamification as being one option of social learning because the collaboration and the competition that it creates is something that encourages people to learn from each other and talk to each other, get to know each other. So gamification can include a lot of different things. It can include different kinds of leaderboards. So a leaderboard is just basically a ranking of, let's say, 1 through 10, the people who have completed the most training, as an example. So that would be what we would call an individual leaderboard. You could also have leaderboards that compare groups to each other. So that would be more of a group leaderboard. And you can see this department versus that department, who's accomplishing the most training or who's working the fastest toward a goal. And then you have motivation through reward. which is part of gamification, typically. And if you are offering meaningful rewards, then you're motivating the behavior that you would like to see in your learners. So maybe you're saying that once you accomplish 2,000 points, you're going to receive a gift card or you're going to receive a little bit of paid time off, that type of thing. So I think the important part with motivation through reward, and maybe you agree with this, is that that reward be a reward that the audience is interested in. Otherwise, you're just putting something out there and it may not motivate the behavior you need. And David says, is collaborative learning a subset of social learning? And I would say, you can't separate the two. I would agree with Ben that collaboration seems to be tied to socialization. I think it depends on how you define the two, but they definitely overlap. And yes, Letitia's saying, I work for a jewelry company and the reward can become a huge undertaking. I would agree with that. And one of the things that's important to consider with gamification is if you're going to be doing leaderboards and so on, you probably want to share the results of how people are doing. If you've got a competition going on for 4 weeks or so, you want to share with everybody, hey, everybody's doing this, that, and the other, and here's the group that's in the lead. You need good reporting for that. So if you're thinking of getting an LMS, I would say always look at the reporting functionality of the LMS and make sure that it will help you, not hurt you, in trying to make sure everybody's in the loop. So, all right, we've kind of already been doing this, but if you've got any thoughts specifically around the benefits of social learning over the traditional, I'm the instructor and you are the student structure, please go ahead and share those in the chat box. And Nicholas asks, who assumes accountability for outcomes in social learning? I would say, and maybe the group has guidance too, the learning and development team still has guidance over what would be considered the formalized training within the organization. Social learning is a little bit more flexible in the sense that you probably don't know everything that people are passing along to each other, but you're just trying to guide them toward an ultimate outcome. So you make sure that the class content is information that those people need. You make sure that there are objectives that you're covering, and you hope and try to guide the social learning to support those objectives. Ben says everybody has a stake in the outcome. Absolutely. Helps you identify high potentials. Yes. Michelle, learners guiding the learning versus us doing it. Yes, absolutely. Learners often know what they need to learn more than we do. And that's another good thing for new hires, just as a side comment. If you have somebody new joining your team, let's say you're a manager, one of the biggest things that I've seen help is making sure that you are not the person who's teaching that new hire everything. Make sure that every single person on your team has time one-on-one so that the two people get to know each other and the people who are more experienced get to impart their knowledge and what has helped them the most. All right, so one question before we move on, I see in the Q&A box from Michael. How do you overcome people who fade into the background during game competition? Well, I don't know that you're ever going to fully overcome that. That is a great question. I think rewards can help with that. I think also if you've got a group competing against another group, then if there's one individual on a group that is not contributing as much, perhaps the group itself will help that individual to become more motivated, if you know what I mean. Sometimes it's better to not have it come from the instructor, just have it come from peers. And thank you guys, by the way, for being so willing to engage in the discussion. That's awesome. All right. So the virtual classroom, 5 little things to talk about here. The virtual classroom is one that sometimes people don't think of as being flippable. You know, if you ever go to conferences, you hear a lot of people talking about the flipped classroom, where people do assignments, they're actually learning things, and then bringing those learnings to a classroom setting where they are discussing more than learning within that setting. And you can absolutely do that through a virtual classroom setting using social learning. So flipping the classroom could be anything from putting out a discussion board that has to do with the class, making that available in the LMS, and letting people discuss things ahead of time. That could be contributing an assignment, a basic assignment, before everybody arrives to the classroom. It could be, if you've got new hires coming in, make sure that they have an opportunity to introduce themselves via a discussion board and ask that each person respond to at least one other person that's got something in common with them, so that you're building a community even before they get in the classroom. And Kimberly says, the sharing of experience from all involved is key. I've seen members so surprised to learn someone they had been working or learning with untapped knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the best things about getting everyone in a classroom, virtual or physical. Virtual classroom, one of the things that I think is really important is using your platform to its fullest. There is that death by PowerPoint syndrome. No matter whether you are in a virtual setting or if you are in person, it does not matter. So if you can use things like Mel was saying at the top of the hour, have people raise their hands or vote on things. We've got polling questions later, that sort of stuff. It breaks up the time in the virtual classroom. And obviously this chat helps it a lot as well. Madison says it builds camaraderie. Absolutely. Building in real life activities, I think, is very important in the virtual classroom setting, because if you have, let's say, 90 minutes of content for a new hire and they're sitting there, they're going to glaze on you no matter how engaging you are, no matter how good the content is. Melissa says, yeah, but use those features with meaning, the chat, like the virtual features with meaning. Don't just use them to use them. Absolutely, Mel. Thank you. The real life activities can really add to a person's ability to retain and just basically give their brain a break. One of the items that seemed to really resonate during a webinar I did about a week ago, there was the idea of scavenger hunts. So if you're teaching, to go with a new hire idea, a new hire session, have everybody run off and find the fire extinguishers on their floor, or find a particular point of interest that you want everyone to know where it is in their office. One of the participants actually came up with the brilliant idea of putting QR codes throughout the office and having a user scan the QR code when they find it. And that can actually be tracked within an LMS. Like within Captivate Prime, you can actually track course completion using QR codes. So that was a brilliant idea. Let's see, looking at the chat. Oh, and Michelle says, have used scavenger hunts within software too. Very cool. If you could collaborate on that, that would be great. So the idea within a virtual classroom setting is to still build that personal connection, whether you're using chat or using some of the other features, making sure that people still feel like they're close to each other and they can talk to each other. And trying to be as blended as possible, because some people like lectures. I actually do. Some people like to read and they prefer to have that tip sheet in front of them. Some people need something that they can touch and feel. So try to think about that and incorporate all of the learning styles so that you keep people's attention as much as you can. Oh, and Michelle said, just following up on the idea of a software scavenger hunt, finding something on the internet could be an idea. That's a great idea. All right. So here's another example of a classroom. This is more of an instructor-led setting. And this is what I like to call an ILT with bells and whistles. So you can definitely still incorporate elements of a virtual classroom training and actually improve the classroom setting. So for instance, one of the things that always kind of got to me when I was working as a technology trainer, if you've got a classroom of, let's say, 80 people, and you've got a couple screens at the front of the room, doesn't matter how big those screens are, not everybody can see. So what you could do is actually have, if you've got a laptop lab, have everybody log into a virtual classroom setting. Even though they're in the room with you, they have that presentation then right in front of you, and they can look at it. They can interact also by using, let's say, the raise hand feature, or they can chat to you, even if they're in the same room. Because I think one thing that sometimes we forget is there are shy people and there are introverts, and some of them don't want to raise their hand or they feel awkward about it. And if you give them a chat box, sometimes they'll actually interact more with the entire class. Camille says, ask learners if they want to participate in games and discussions. Absolutely. Don't make people feel like they're forced into one method of relating to others. And again, the tech-enhanced classroom, virtual classroom, it doesn't matter. Try to blend as many delivery formats as is sensible to support the training and make sure everybody is engaged. Encourage, if you can, competition through simulation. So actually this goes nicely with Michelle's software idea, where you can go in and either have somebody do a scavenger hunt on the computer, or you could have them go through and complete some sort of a simulation. Maybe you've built an e-learning course, and you could actually have them do a little timed simulation right there in the classroom and then discuss what they've learned. And Ben says, invasive fun, rolling out little changes at a time. That's a great idea. One thing that is great with complex topics or topics that require practice is shortening classroom experiences and basically spreading them out. So it's more like if you think of a college course where you have a weekly lecture, but you've got time to process things and do assignments in between what you're learning in the lectures. That's allowing the learner to practice the skills that you're teaching and hopefully retain more of it than if you just hit them over the head with 8 hours of content, which, as we know, is not the easiest way to get people on board with new content. And then the last one here is kind of a fun one, and it's great for productivity in terms of the trainer's productivity. Tracking learner participation using QR codes. So this is becoming, obviously QR codes in general are becoming more common, and certain learning management systems have gotten on board and are starting to use them more. Captivate Prime is one that actually allows a trainer to put up a QR code at the front of the classroom or near the door, and people can scan it on their way in and receive credit right then and there for being there in the classroom training. They're basically marking themselves rather than you doing it. So that's kind of neat. David, use QR code to use everyone's cell phones to mark them to keep them attentive. We can see you. You better pay attention. All right. David. All right. great ideas going on, and I'm sorry that I'm not catching all of the questions as we're going through. I'm doing my best, but you guys are moving quickly in the chat pod. Monica says, in my organization, AI is becoming huge. How can AI be incorporated into L&D? And I'm opening that question up to all of you. Are you using AI right now, or would you like to use it? And how do you want to use it? Let's collect some ideas here. Personally, what I've seen more of in my own practice is augmented reality right now. And I say that because I've got some experience in aerospace and using something like Google Glass to work in a weapons bay and know which piece is what without, carrying tip sheets with you or laptop or something kind of cumbersome. That's something that's becoming more common. And maybe you guys have some ideas you'd like to contribute here. Great. Thank you for all the ideas that you're putting in there. And Christy says, I've seen AI used to show children how others live in different countries and how that climate looks. That's such a cool idea. That would be good also just for building camaraderie and getting people to know each other's cultures if you've got a global organization. That'd be neat. All right. So blending is awesome, as we've discussed. But how do you motivate learners to participate in a blended learning environment? We've talked a little bit already about this, but how do you get people, how have you seen people engage when you're asking them to do activities and so on and so forth? Dave, it's funny because it's a blender. Ha! I try to pick interesting stock images. And Jens is asking, anyone who's used VR in training, please private message him. He needs some help with that, some ideas. Anne says, factory workers could perhaps use it to see their environment before actually bringing them into the warehouse, etc. Going back to the AI concept, or VR perhaps. I think blended learning is really well supported by gamification, which is actually something that we're going to be getting into, at least briefly here, and we're going to be looking at some examples of that. All right, so the ideas are still floating in the chat box, but I am going to actually move into showing you guys some live examples of what social learning and gamification can look like. So for this example, I'm actually using, as you would probably expect since I'm from Adobe, Captivate Prime. And this is the learning technology platform. So if you've never seen or had the opportunity to see badges and leaderboards and so on, this will give you the real life example of that. All right, so Mel, if you could please switch me to the other layout because I'm not seeing the button. Thank you. You can break things if you don't have Mel on your side watching you. Okay. As you see my messy desktop that I just pulled tons of HTML documents over onto. Okay, so, and you know what I'm gonna do? Let's see if I can get the chat box and pull it over onto my other monitor. See, that's a clever idea. Okay. Now I can see what you're saying. So here we have, this is the learner interface within Captivate Prime. And I'm going to come over and actually show you the badges, which here I have, since I've got badges and leaderboard enabled by my administrator, I can see these things. You can also disable them, at least in most platforms you can. So we'll go to badges. And you can see here, I actually have quite a few badges in progress. The neat thing about badges, and something that a lot of people don't realize, People think that badges are just something pretty that you can put onto your LMS dashboard. Depending on your platform, that might be all they are. But you can also actually put badges onto, let's say, LinkedIn or some other social media site to advertise your skill set. And it's not, again, just putting a picture on there. It's actually that the badge links back to data that validates that you've taken the class that you took, and also that you are who you say you are, basically. You know, John Smith took such and such Compliance 101 training on this date, and the badge actually contains that information if somebody wants to drill down into it. So that's kind of a neat thing about badges that some people don't know. And you've got all of these different things. A lot of times you can customize your badges by having badges that you've created put in here. These are all the ones that actually come with Captivate Prime. I'm just not that artistic, so I stick with what is in the system. And you can see also here down at the bottom, sorry, I froze here for a minute. All right, so down here at the bottom, we also have my leaderboard, which I can go to. And what are you saying here, David? You're saying, I suppose there's a need to create your own customized badges. I'm trying to see where you were going with that thought. By the way, let's say you have, I can't remember how many exactly are in Prime, but 10 or 15, badges that are automatically within the system. You can have the same badge picture representing multiple classes, if that makes sense. So you can just basically go in and say, okay, well, this particular course or this program will earn such and such badge, and you can attach it. All right, so this is a quick overview of what a leaderboard can look like. Okay, David just came back. Let's say you create your own subject and you can create your own badge with Illustrator or Photoshop and assign it. Absolutely, you can do that. And Ben says, lots of fun badges. We built our own LMS. That's awesome. All right. So just to look at the leaderboard real quick, I've come in here and here I am here at the top. Of course, I'm at the top. So you can see here all of the rankings of the people around my rank. So this is actually driven by the HRIS. It can see kind of the structure of your organization. And it's giving me an idea of how I rank with essentially my group members, David. So you can also select user groups and different things. Like down here at the bottom, I typed in all admins because there's lots of administrators within this team. I'll show you how I would do that. So if I went to all admins, it's ranking me only against other admins. And you can see how we all rank, and I'm only number 5 in this group. Here at the top, this is kind of a fun thing too. If you've got people working toward a particular goal, like you want people to accomplish the bronze trophy by getting 1,500 points, you can kind of set up this timeline of accomplishments, and then you can add colleagues to that timeline to see how they all rank. So actually, I went to add colleagues, typed in some colleagues' names. So Pooja, you see here, is a beginner. She just came in, so she's ranked at 0. You can see Oliver is ranked at 150, so he's taken some materials and completed them, and I can just basically see how they rank on the leaderboard. You can assign points and earn points for being fast learning, completing things quickly by a particular deadline, by being self-driven. You can see all of the different selections here. Margaret, that's fine. We love having you regardless. So this gives you an idea of what a gamification leaderboard can do and how it functions in general. Going back to the concept of reporting being very important in this, I think it's very, very key that you remember to advertise how a gamification initiative is going. So let's say you've got a 4-week program going and you want everyone to take, I don't know, 2,500 points worth of training within that time period. It's very important to report on, let's say, a weekly basis to the managers how their teams are doing so that they can drive that and people don't just forget about the program. So you can, for instance, I'm going to go and switch views real quick. I'm going to become an administrator for a minute. Gens, yes, you can customize the benchmarks for different levels. So now I'm an administrator. I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm going to go to reports. And this just goes back to the concept of before you buy a learning technology platform with the intention of using it for gamification, take a good look at the reporting and make sure that the reporting will help you with your initiatives. So here we see some sample reports that are built. This gives me an idea of learning time spent. This gives me an idea of all sorts of things. I can build a custom dashboard report and place it here. I can add a dashboard. These are certain things that might be more specific to Captivate Prime. This isn't necessarily something in every LMS, but I can basically build out a report and export it and have it sent on a weekly basis to my managers using the subscriptions option. So it's automatically being emailed. And these are features that you can look for if you are planning on doing a gamification initiative, so you're not having to recreate the wheel. Because as someone said earlier, and I can attest, it takes a lot of work to keep on top of a gamification initiative if you have to pull over the data every week and splice it and do pivot tables in Excel. That's very painful on an administrator. And actually, here we have Excel reports that have the pivot tables already built in for you. So that would be ideal if you're going that direction with gamification. Marcus, Excel, yawn. Excel is awesome. But yes, it could be a yawn. All right. So let's see. What am I forgetting that I was going to tell you about? Social learning gamification. Oh, I remember what it was. Okay, let me switch back to Learner quickly. Wanted to show you one example of how someone could leave feedback on a course and also how course effectiveness can be measured. So I'm going to go to the catalog real quick. And I'm going to go to this course here at the top that I just added today. Okay, so I'm here in the course. Now I could go ahead and start the course. For our purposes, I'm not going to. And here I could actually leave a note about the course. I could either leave feedback about it, or I could ask a question of the instructor or the instructional designer. And this is one way that, basically learners could answer each other's questions. I would be able to view questions that somebody else had left on this course and answer them if I know the answer. So that's one way of interacting. And Nicholas says, this seems so automated while we are talking about social learning. And do you mean by that, Nicholas, that it seems like the admin tools are not necessarily promoting the social learning? What do you mean by that? Because I want to respond to that. There was one other thing, course effectiveness, that I was going to talk about a little bit. So let's go back to the catalog and scroll through here, and I'm going to just pick on one of these. We were talking about course ratings, and I wanted to talk about a couple different ways that that is accomplished. You could see a lot of different LMSs allow a learner to rank something 1 to 5 stars. So that's pretty common. Um, in this particular platform, it's interesting because course effectiveness, or the rating, is based on a number of different factors. So I wanted to show this to you. It's kind of interesting. You, as an administrator, would be able to set surveys that would go to the learner and also to the learner's manager after a course has been completed. And part of the course effectiveness rating is actually based on those two things, the learner and the manager's feedback about the course, and then also the scores from quizzes that might be associated. So it's actually a blended score, if you will. And that's kind of interesting. So I wanted to point that out as well. All right. So I am looking at the board because I know I missed some stuff that you were talking about. Yeah, okay. Nicholas is saying in social learning, people interact and build products that need to be assessed and improved based on human feedback, not progressing through automated learning modules, etc., that issue badges based on quizzes. I agree with you. The thing that I would add on to that, though, is that you can have content that is essentially automated. I think you can have slides and knowledge that you can deliver through a learning management system, then have an instructor add on to that and have opportunities for people to socialize and interact. I think it's a great comment that you're making. I think it's important that we don't depend only on automated learning products to provide learners with what they're looking for. That's one piece of it, perhaps, but it's not the whole puzzle. So the idea of social learning, and maybe the challenge of that, is to build on what we're delivering in e-learning and provide a more rounded experience. And that's a great comment, Nicholas. All right, so I'm going to jump actually back out of the system here. I think I've explained what I wanted to explain. Hang on one second while we jump back into our PowerPoint. Great, okay, here we go. And we will continue. Monica asks a great question. Monica says, how can we make our, I'm going to switch back real quick. How can we make our training friendly to those with disabilities? So I think that's a great question, and I'd love to have the group respond to that. Certainly, it depends on what type of disability that you might be looking to cater to. And I think that's another great reason to build in classroom training in a blended learning format, because perhaps certain formats are more conducive to helping someone with that disability rather than other formats. Another thing is equivalencies, being able to offer the same content in multiple formats. And Captivate Prime and other LMSs do that. So somebody has the choice between going to class, viewing something online, that type of thing, and that provides a framework for someone to feel perhaps more comfortable taking content. All right, so for fun, we have a multiple choice. So if we could get that pulled over, Mel, she is the master and knows all. And you can select, by the way, you can select multiple answers here. And I'm just curious what everyone thinks. What types of gamification do you think would work for your organization? Great feedback coming in here. Yeah, and as Mel is saying, there's no submit button. As soon as you select your answers, it goes straight through and everybody can see. So it looks like badges are taking a slight head here. You also have points and other rewards or prizes coming in. We've got group leaderboards. The nice part about this is we actually have a nice split going down. We don't have a major lead amongst the options, and we've got some great options coming in the chat box as well. And Talia, yeah, the voting tool is very cool. All right, and we have lots of questions in the box here. So I will read some of these. When implementing gamification, wouldn't it be better to tie the points to actual rewards specific to the organization to make sure people do not lose interest over time? I think that's a great idea. If you let people know, hey, once you reach this threshold, you're going to receive this reward. Maybe don't make the choice for them. Maybe give them a choice of 5 different things that might be meaningful to them. I think that's a great idea. Talia, no, I'm not conducting the webinar through Prime 9. This is actually Adobe Connect, the environment that we're in right now. All right, so I'm actually going to scoot a little bit because we're at 10 minutes. And I want to show you a couple of other things. We've got a little video at the end. All right. Dave, you get the no badges badge. That's funny. So aligning gamification with business goals. This is something that's really key because if you've got your gamification out there and it just doesn't seem to have any meaning, it just looks like busy work, no matter what kind of prize you're offering, your learners are not going to appreciate that. So you want to make sure that you advertise what the meaning is behind the training. Let's say it's compliance training. I've used this for security awareness. If you gamify that and you say, basically, this is compliance training. We all need to go through it, but let's make this a little bit interesting. Let's have a competition and provide prizes. You're being open with the learner and saying, hey, this is something you'd have to go through regardless, but we want to try to make this fun for you. And I think that's a refreshing thing to just be transparent with the learner. Steve has a great question. Opinions about gamification in higher ed, if anybody has thoughts on that. So learning technology. One of the key things to aligning gamification with your goals is thinking ahead and knowing, okay, well, my licensing is coming due at the end of this year. And what kind of learning technology am I going to need? Part of knowing what learning technology you're going to need is going around and talking to the users about the user experience. And it's something that I have seen a lot of organizations forget to do. It's something that, might strike you as obvious, but people get in a hurry and they think that the first step of implementing technology is to select it, when actually there's a step before that, which is to go talk to the users. Organizational structure also can influence gamification because depending on how your divisions are structured and so on, you may want to do individual competitions. You may want to do group competitions. You may want to, if you're just starting out with gamification, pick a group that's a fairly forgiving and kind group and do a little pilot just with that group and see how they react to it, work out some kinks before you roll it out to everybody. In general, that tends to be a great thing to do with a lot of learning and development initiatives. Okay, what did Andrea say? Because I see people like it. We are in the process of building a virtual shop that lives on the LMS. Learners earn points. Ooh, you're scrolling. Learners earn points and then they can go shopping. That's neat. They can buy digital items like cute digital stickers or download things like posters or even choose to buy a physical item like a mug. That's neat. That's a great option. All right, so culture. Culture is another thing that determines how you align gamification. For instance, and I use this actually in my other webinar, I come from legal. That was part of my training management background. And the concept originally was that attorneys were never going to be interested in gamification because they're too busy and they're too high paid and so on and so forth. So what we did was we actually ran a pilot of only staff and just saw how they reacted to the gamification and then expanded it and brought in the attorneys later on once we knew that it was a cultural match. And that kind of goes back to the idea of testing things before you roll to everybody and kind of working out the kinks. This goes without saying, but making sure that gamification is aligned with your leadership's goals is always a great thing. And making sure that leadership sees a return on investment so that they don't just think you're clowning around and putting out a gamification program that's more fun than functional. And that goes back to reporting. Great reporting, great dashboards will reinforce to leadership that what you're putting out is in alignment with your organization's goals. Ultimately makes you look really good. Talia, yes, testing is so important. Camise, can these ideas be bite-sized for those who are micro-learners, and is everything accessible via mobile devices? Yes. At least in the case of Captivate Prime, yes, it is. That is something to check into when you're buying learning technology. But you can download an app and see all of this functionality within the app. And that's something to definitely ask about if you're reviewing vendors. All right, we're getting to the end. And I've got a 3-minute little video if you're interested in learning more about Captivate Prime. But before we get into that, one last question for you. What is one specific goal you would like to accomplish through gamification or social learning? And while you're answering that, I'm going to ask Mel a question. I know there were some questions, Mel, that I failed to get to. Is there a way for me to respond to people after this?
Yes, Katrina, there is a way, and I have a couple different thoughts on that we can chat about as well. But we have been capturing the questions, and you all have been really wonderful throughout this whole session. So I don't want anyone to think we missed your questions. We just had a lot, as Katrina said. So Katrina, we'll find a way to answer them either directly, or we can maybe put an FAQ together of those questions and post those as a handout.
So I'm going to do a couple things here while you're giving some great ideas over in the chat box. I'm popping up my information here in case anybody wants to contact me directly with questions. You can certainly do that. I'm always on LinkedIn, and you can always email me at Adobe as well. Great ideas going on in the chat. I also want to give an opportunity, if you want to click this link, you can. If you're interested in learning more about Captivate Prime, I know there's been some confusion. This session is actually being conducted, this webinar is being conducted in Adobe Connect, which is a virtual conferencing platform. The product that we were looking at earlier, the learning technology platform, is Captivate Prime, also made by Adobe. So if you want to learn more about it, you can click on this link and it'll give you a free trial. Keep the ideas coming. The ideas are awesome. And while you are providing those ideas, I'd like to ask Mel if she would mind. Adobe was kind enough to sponsor this session. So want to give you a little bit idea of what they're doing in the future with social learning. And there's a little disclaimer coming with this because obviously this is future content that's being added to Captivate Prime, so it could change before it rolls out. The appearance could change, so on and so forth. But we wanted to give you an idea of what's being worked on right now. So Mel, if you wouldn't mind showing that.
Brian is a member of the Cloud Tech team at Quest Technologies Company. He finds an interesting online article on machine learning that he'd like to share with his colleagues. He tags the relevant skill, machine learning, and then posts the article to a pre-existing board under that skill. He also adds intelligence about the article. On the social learning homepage, Brian can browse board posts by other learners and search by skills to find more content of interest. Another learner is Karen, who's notified about posts under skills that interest her. She logs into the LMS and reads the article that Brian posted. Karen decides to share a working example on the same topic, so she records a video using Presenter Video Express and posts it to the same board. A machine learning algorithm determines if user-generated content needs curation. Harold is a subject matter expert who is assigned to moderate content that does not pass through the machine learning algorithm. When he logs into Captivate Prime, he's notified of a curation request. Here, he can approve or disapprove of the content. Meanwhile, Nicole, the LMS administrator, gets an overall view of the skills and boards active within her organization. She can select any post and convert it into a formal learning module. Nicole selects the post by Brian and converts it into a formal module. Now, other authors at Quest Technologies can embed the article posted by Brian or Karen into a new course that they're creating. In this way, new modules that originated as user-generated content are transformed into formal learning modules by the administrator. Users are designated social learners and are incentivized to contribute to the platform. While SMEs earn points for curation, they also stand to lose points for not acting on a curation request. The SMEs help reduce clutter by acting as gatekeepers to ensure user contributions are relevant and provide value. Upon earning a certain number of points, the social learner gains SME status with the ability to curate content. This keeps the social learning culture going. Adobe Captivate Prime organizes and enhances informal learning through a social network that makes useful knowledge accessible to everyone across the organization. Real people, real learning.
All right. Can you hear me? Just give me a yes in the chat. Thank you. All right, so I hope you liked that little video. It's nice to see, I guess, an overall example of where social learning is headed. So hopefully that's of interest to you. And certainly if you want any information about that, I do work for Adobe. So you can always email me and reach out. Some people ask for my contact information. I'll pop that up here again. But with that, I want to hand this back to Mel. We are at the end of our hour. And I want to appreciate each and every one of you who contributed in chat to this session. You have been an amazing audience. Not really audience because you're all contributing. You're all collaborators. So great example of social learning. And hope to continue this discussion with you. If you're interested in doing that, please reach out. And with that, thank you, Mel, for your great help during this session. And I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Katrina, and thanks to all of you for joining. You've been a wonderful group. I'm going to bring up the evaluation now, so please stand by. We appreciate you giving us feedback. And our evaluation is just 6 poll pods. There is no submit button, just simply select your answers. Again, thank you for joining, and a big thank you to Adobe and Katrina for all this wonderful information. Just a reminder, this session has been recorded. We will be posting it up on the e-learning industry website. Once it is up and ready, we will send follow-up emails that will include a link so you can access that. Again, thank you all for joining. We appreciate you joining from all over the world, and we look forward to seeing you in a future event.